around the nation, Waldorf Nation. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the show. Jeff Waldorf, Waldorf Nation. But also joining me today is Ron Placone.
What's up, Jeff? Good to see you, buddy. How you been?
Hey, not too bad. Busy.
I'm
busy
bummed,
as
I'm
all
bummed
get
I
out.
didn't get to see you when I was in Detroit.
Yeah, sorry. I just had so much going on.
Oh, no, it's cool,
Forget.
man. I wasn't in. I mean, if I would have been around longer, I would have said, well, why don't we try to grab lunch or something? But I was
Oh,
literally
yeah.
just in for the night. I came in,
Yeah.
did the show, and went back to Pittsburgh because I had a new niece to spend time with.
Oh, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah, I got to meet her when I was out there. She's 3 months old, so
Oh, that's awesome. That's
yeah, it's
wonderful.
pretty cool, man. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. Hey, you're here for a quick segment. You got some pretty important news when it comes to digital rights. So, and then you're going to be hard out, but of course, after that. But rest of the show, we got some fun stuff. No, of course, obviously, we're going to talk about the third Trump indictment. Third time's the charm, maybe. Climate change news. Debt forgiveness, student loan debts, and of course, SCOTUS corruption, the usual mix of horrible stories. But first, Ron, let's get to some digital action.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, Jeff, it's funny you mentioned in the long spiel of things, you mentioned a couple things that are really connected to all this. The Supreme Court, and not just the Supreme Court, but all courts, and climate change. It's interesting to me. I am a firm believer that digital rights are human rights, and I also see the connection to so many other things like climate and
Right.
labor and you name it. And it's so tragic that the past week or so, we have had literally some of the hottest days on record ever throughout various parts of the world, like some of the hottest days ever. And you look at something like the internet, like our global village and technology in general, and you think this can be such a valuable, essential tool in helping us to build a better society.
Right.
Meanwhile, we have a Congress and a government that's just obsessed with passing these horrific dystopian bills that just make the internet
Absolutely.
worse. And it is
Absolutely.
so tragic and backwards, and it just drives you nuts. And I've been, you and I have been collaborating for a long time now. You know that I've been on this beat. I mean, I still remember when we were talking about net neutrality back when
Yeah.
we were both just starting out, man. I mean, that was back when, that was pre-Skype even, I think. Not to date ourselves a little out of it was that, I think we were on Skype actually. It wasn't.
Yeah, I think we probably were. Oh, you remember?
It might have been the Google Hangouts day.
Yes, I was gonna say I'm really gonna date us now. Google Plus, Google Hangouts,
Google Plus.
Oh
Yes.
my goodness!
I still remember you asked me about a lower third, and at the time I didn't know what a lower third was. You were like, "Hey Ron, did you fill in your lower third?" And I'm like, "What is that?" Anyway, man. So what's going on is that a group of human rights organizations, Fight for the Future is among them, the ACLU, EFF. They're launching a week of action starting on July 20th to let Congress know that they can't pass these horrific bills. Because what's going on right now is that Congress is about to leave for recess. They're going to have their August recess coming up soon. That's why this action ends on July 28th, right before that recess. And they always have a bunch of must-pass legislation. And what they'll do is they'll try to tack on some horrible bills to must-pass legislation. Tale as old as time. And one of the bills that we know is for sure likely to be in there. They're still working all this out. And EFF is in Washington, D.C. right now with all the nitty-gritty details. So it's changing by the hour. But what we know so far is that COSA will likely be among these bills. COSA is a bill. It's called the Kids Online Safety Act, which, of course, when you just say that out loud, who wouldn't be for that?
Yeah,
That sounds like a great
don't
thing.
you care about children?
Right,
Ron?
exactly. It sounds great. Here's what it actually does, though, Jeff. It blows a hole in encryption messaging. So it makes all of our DMs way more vulnerable online, which makes nobody safe. And it also gives
Especially journalists.
especially journalists, and it just gives overarching surveillance powers to bureaucracy and government. So this does not keep
But
kids safe
but Ron,
online.
don't. I mean, look, I know conservatives are all about protecting children, right? So you'd think that Republicans would be all in favor of giving away their liberty in order to protect the children, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, as
Oh.
long as it's not their liberty, they're fine with it. As
Mm.
long as it's just like young people's liberty or some of some of the most vulnerable groups, their liberty, then they're fine with it. In fact, recently the Heritage Foundation said the quiet part out loud. It basically said, "Yeah, we really want to push bills like this through so we can make it harder for transgender people to get the resources they need."
Oh, of
Is
course.
what
Yes.
it's all about, man. And so, these bills, and there's a number of them. The website badinternetbills.com, which of course I'll be plugging later because that's where the big call to action is for everyone. They sum up a lot of these bills. Bills like the
Mhm.
Restrict Act, which was casually known as the Don't Ban TikTok bill, which
Right.
banning TikTok would have just been on the list of terrible things that it would do. It would basically give the government full control over what apps you could and couldn't see and what news you could and couldn't see that comes from outside of the United States, because it messes with something called the Berman Amendments, which is how we're able to get information from other countries without any interference. So it blows a hole in that, which would make a scenario where Joe Biden or Donald Trump or whoever else could be president next would get to decide what news you could and couldn't see if it's from somewhere other than the United States.
So perhaps even a news agency in another country that might be critical of, for example, American imperialism.
Imagine,
Oh,
Jeff. Yeah,
hmm,
exactly. So,
interesting.
yeah, and then you have all these other bills, COSA, which does not keep kids safe online. It actually makes their lives more difficult. Bills like the Earn It Act, which also blows a hole in encryption and makes all of our data more vulnerable. And you just see a lot of these bills or similar bills go into effect. You see some of these practices go into action, and you just see how terrible they are. And they don't make anyone safer. They just make the internet a more dangerous place, and they make it just more miserable for everyone. And it's just a surveillance hellscape, really.
Mhm.
And these online surveillance tools are leading to terrible things like the transgender registry in Florida. Recently in Mississippi, they're now collecting information on anyone who gets abortion care or gender affirming care in other states. So, the most vulnerable here is the LGBTQIA community, people of
Right.
color, Black people, women,
Also,
women's
yeah,
rights.
pregnant
I mean,
people.
pregnant people. I mean, that
Yeah,
is the most vulnerable groups here. And
right.
all of these bills are not about making anyone more safe online. It's all about just surveillance and authoritarianism, largely against these groups, but really against everybody online.
So, so you talk about that, but so what you're saying though is basically these are private companies though, right?
Hmm.
That can take our data and then give it to the government, right? Give it to law enforcement.
Government, law enforcement, you name it. Yeah. I mean, and they're already doing
Public,
that. Yeah. I mean, you covered, I'm pretty sure you covered this story at one point. I know I talked a lot about it when it happened, but Facebook was sharing DMs when it was in regards to a teenager that was trying to get abortion information. I believe
oh,
it was
that's
in
right.
Nebraska, and they were desperate. And Facebook got their DMs to pursue or shared their DMs so that the powers that be could pursue criminal charges.
So
So,
so COSA, and that's one of the things too. That's problems with COSA is it would deny online resources for people searching for abortion care, and
mhm.
also people looking for gender affirming care, members of the LGBTQIA plus community, or trying to get some around some of the Republican right wing book bans, and trying to help transgender people, gay people, whatever, you discover and confirm their identities, or just to not feel so alone.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the thing. It's like some of these resources, it really is the difference between
Life
life and
saving.
death. Yeah, I mean, literally, man. And to take that away and criminalize it and just make life even harder for transgender youth is just so, it's really gross. And at the end of the
But that's the
day,
point.
that's the point. And at the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's like, look at what they're literally keeping a registry. That's not an embellishment. That's what's happening. It's happening in 2023 in the freaking United States. And
Imagine
it's
if there
not
were a
just
gun
Florida.
registry.
Yeah. Yeah, or any other. I mean, look. I mean, we've seen this happen throughout human history. It's not good. And it's happening right now. It's happening right now. You know, I make the comment where it's just one of those things when people try to downplay these issues and they're just like, well, you know, I'm not transgender, so maybe I just don't care that much. There's other, it's a wedge issue because it doesn't apply to me personally. It's like, it does apply to you, first of all. And second of all, you know that age old saying, you know, first they came for the communists, I did not speak out. Then they came for the socialists, I did not speak out. Well, hey, in Florida, we're midway through it now. First, they came for the transgender community. You didn't speak out. Well, now they're coming for the communists and socialists.
And
Still
by
not
the way,
speaking out.
yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And also, again, if you're not any one of those groups, well, if you like to, you know, perchance look at some racy images online, you know, and if you live in a place like Utah, for example,
Right.
with all these age gating bills that are being passed, where you have to, as an adult, present ID in order to look at your favorite, I don't know, adult websites, well, that's going to compromise your privacy, isn't it?
Yeah, just a little bit, especially since these databases are vulnerable to hacking. What's going on in Utah right now is you need to give a license every time you want to see an adult website. And first of all, that's not, look, Jeff, you and I are of the generation where we are just old enough to remember the days where we would go out to the woods to dig up a Playboy magazine somebody stole. My point is that if young people want to access that adult material, they're going to find a way. And these age gating things that make you show an ID, it's not effective. And it's incredibly a huge invasion of privacy, especially since a lot of these databases are very easily hacked. That's why YouPorn left Utah. They were like, look, we definitely want
it was
ours.
Pornhub, actually.
Or Pornhub, excuse me. Yeah, Pornhub. But yeah, they left. And it wasn't because, I mean, look, nobody wants people who aren't of age to be exploring this stuff. Everybody wants, you know, like a safe place. But, you know, that doesn't mean you enact these policies that doesn't help the problem and it actually makes it worse like this. And Pornhub just said, hey, look, this is putting a lot of pressure on us because this is not going to work. This is going to make people's information more vulnerable, which is going to make us more susceptible to lawsuits and whatever else. We're out of here. You know,
I mean, imagine a Republican politician in some of their searches, you know, which again, good for them and doing whatever, you know, whatever tickles your fancy, right? But you know, some of the stuff that they might be into could cause some issues with their voters, so they might want to think twice about allowing this information to get out there to average, you know, to these companies, to law enforcement, and just to be leaked out by hackers who could use that stuff against them.
So yeah, I mean, it's like we're having this call to action because these are the moments where they try to push through these bills, and we know they're trying to push COSA through. I believe the other big one is Cooper Davis, which opens the door for increased surveillance of messaging, and it also damages encryption. A lot of times they're going after encryption here.
They really don't like encryption.
They do not like encryption, which for anyone who may not know, encryption basically makes it's a thick layer of security for your direct messages across platforms.
They want to read your private messages, guys.
Yeah.
This is about as dystopian as it gets.
Really?
And you know, do you really want the government to read your private messages? Again, you don't have to be doing anything illegal. This is not about like, are your private messages illegal or whatever? No, it's just about your personal privacy. And again, you could also, you know, I guess I'm trying to think of the word here, but apply it to journalism and how people get stories and leaks and try to do investigative journalism. They rely a lot on encryption, trying to, you know, really find out what the government is actually doing in our name, okay, that would be a lot more difficult without this encryption. If the government could just find out where these leaks are coming from, and we wouldn't have people like Chelsea Manning or Edward Snowden that revealing these things that the government is doing. Without that.
Yeah, absolutely, man, and Julian Assange and everyone else. I mean, and it's one of those things. So we're having this week of action starting Thursday, July 20th, and you can do it in the meantime too. It's not like but Thursday is when it's really go time. People can go to badinternetbills.com. That's badinternetbills.com, and you can contact your legislatures saying, hey, we demand that these bills don't go forward. You're not going to try to push these bills through when people aren't paying attention. We're paying attention, and we're saying no to these bills. So badinternetbills.com. The other really cool thing about this resource, Jeff, I mean, I kind of just gave a cliff notes on some of the bills involved. This website really goes into the nitty gritty of all these bills we're talking about. So you don't have to take my word for it. You can kind of go there, do your own reading, and contact your legislator and say, hey, you're not pushing these bills through.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Ron. Thank you for giving us a synopsis and having this conversation and working with these groups to try to stop these just horrible draconian anti-freedom, anti-free speech, anti-privacy laws. I really appreciate the time.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. And if you don't mind, one more time, I'll just reiterate it, badinternetbills.com, and I'm sure the link will be in the description and stuff. And for any of your listeners who may be overseas, I'll be at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival in August 16th through 27th. I'll be in Edinburgh, and I'll also be in San Pedro, California, October 21st. Tickets and all information are at my website, ronplacone.com. And again, most importantly, badinternetbills.com.
All right. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you, Jeff.
We'll see you again later.
Be well, buddy. Peace.
Thank you. All right, everybody. I'm just going to get stuff set up for the rest of the show. All right. And then we're going to get into some fun stuff. All right. Oh boy. Here we go. We have a third Trump indictment. Fun. Former President Donald Trump is expecting yet a third criminal indictment. Awesome. Now, on Tuesday, Trump said he received a target letter from Jack Smith's January 6th grand jury. This was on Sunday. So during the weekend, apparently he was very, very unhappy about this happening during the weekend. On Sunday night, he said, while I was with my family, horrifying news for our country was given to me by my attorneys. Deranged Jack Smith sent a letter. Again, it was Sunday night. Yes, it was Sunday night. How dare they try to go after me, in my alleged crimes? Stating that I am a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation. It gave me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest, an indictment. And he would know because he's already been through this twice. According to Politico, the letter is a clear sign that Smith is close to seeking an indictment for Trump's role in the effort to disrupt the peaceful transfer of power, January 6, 2021. So now, even though we do not know the details of specific crimes, Politico noted that Smith's team has been eyeing potential obstruction charges related to Trump's actions in the days leading up to January 6th and on that day itself, including pressuring Vice President Mike Pence to unilaterally block the certification of Joe Biden's election victory. So, okay. There's tweets. And you can just go and you can look at the tweets. I think they are probably up now since Elon Musk unbanned Trump from Twitter, even though he doesn't use it. His account is still up. But I'm going to read you some of them anyway. This is on January 6th at 1 a.m., where he tweeted, if Vice President Mike Pence comes through with us, we will win the presidency. Many states Want to decertify the mistake they made in certifying incorrect and even fraudulent numbers in a process not approved by their state legislatures, which it must be. Mike can send it back. At 8 a.m., he tweeted this. States want to correct their votes, which they now know were based on irregularities and fraud, plus corrupt process, never received legislative approval. All Mike Pence has to do is send them back to the states, and we win. Do it, Mike. This is a time for extreme courage. Not just the normal courage, it's extreme courage. The most extreme courage. The biggest courage, the best courage, the most extreme. Okay, anyway, there's more. At 2:24 p.m., after the riot was underway, and Mike Pence, of course, did not choose to not certify the election. So he certified the election results. Here's what Trump tweeted. Mike Pence didn't have the courage to do what should have been done. Now, look, that last one, of course, led to chants by the Capitol rioters of hang Mike Pence. Not hang my pants. No, it's hang Mike Pence. So you know that they were listening. You know that they were incited by Donald Trump's words. So investigators have looked at that. They've also examined Trump's consideration of a plan to seize voting machines from the states, and also his campaign of false election claims and the fake elector plot. And that's not even including the other stuff, the indictment in New York, the possible indictment in Georgia that we're expecting. And so, I mean, a lot of trouble here. Okay, a lot of indictments. He's been indicated many times, people are saying. Now, finally, a source familiar with the special counsel's probe and Department of Justice operating procedures told The Independent that the earliest an indictment could be handed down is late Thursday or Friday. So we've got something to look forward to at the end of this week. Yeah, indictments. So by the end of the week, we will know. We will see what the charges are, the specific charges, and what possible penalties will go along with them. So fascinating. Can't wait. All right. So let's get to the reaction here, because MAGA was not having a normal one. All right. Oops, all indictments. True. Okay. On Tuesday, former President Donald Trump announced that he is the target of a third criminal indictment. On True Social, he posted this. Deranged Jack Smith sent a letter stating that I'm a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation and give me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest, an indictment. This witch hunt is all about election interference and a complete and total political weaponization of law enforcement. It is a very sad and dark period for our nation. Fun. Now, that's Trump. And of course, more unhinged stuff will eventually come out. But it's nothing that we haven't heard before. But I'm going to go to the reaction here from some members who are, of the Republican Party who are very pro-Trump. I'm going to show you how well they took the news.
Yeah, it's absolute bullshit. Yeah, that's my reaction. This is the only way that the Democrats have to beat President Trump, is to arrest him, smear him, charge him with ridiculous charges, all in a cover-up of Joe Biden's crimes, Hunter Biden's crimes. It's unbelievable.
Well, I guess under a Biden administration, Biden America, you'd expect this. If you notice recently, President Trump went up in the polls and was actually surpassing President Biden for re-election. So what do they do now? Weaponize government to go after their number one opponent.
Here we go again. You see the president's polls are like really just blasting off into space. And it doesn't surprise me, because as he gains even more momentum as we go into 2024, they're just throwing everything they can up against the wall to try to make it stick.
And still, we're in this moment where we're looking at the handling of the Hunter Biden probe and the investigation there. And James Comer's still at it. Jim Jordan on the Ingram angle last night on that said that these two whistleblowers have been nothing but credible.
Hunter Biden. Oh, it all comes back to Hunter Biden. That's the real issue. I know we're supposed to be talking about the Donald Trump third indictment, but Hunter Biden. Funny enough on that, one of their so-called whistleblowers was just indicted for being a Chinese spy, an alleged Chinese spy, and the other had spread conspiracy theories while working at the FBI. So very, very credible, though, I hear. Many people are saying they're very, very credible. More reaction here, by the way. Representative Steve Scalise said, quote, "It's interesting that it happens more and more as Trump rises in the polls and Biden falls in the polls. That's an unfortunate part of this and an unequal application of justice." No, look, with these people are so incredibly used to being untouchable, absolutely, that they just cannot fathom that someone would actually hold them accountable for doing alleged crimes. Weird. Now, there's more. Representative Jim Jordan called this looming indictment, quote, "ridiculous and wrong. I can't believe this is happening in our country. Can't believe it. Holding a rich person accountable for crime." Yeah, I know. I can't believe it either, because we almost never hold rich people accountable and powerful people. Representative Tim Burchett said the only thing it's going to do is make his numbers go up. So look, that's a common narrative that they're talking, that they're using. Is that well, this is all political, which is why it's helping Donald Trump in the polls. Wait, what? That doesn't make any sense. And by the way, that point has nothing to do with whether or not Trump had actually committed crimes. I know, but they can't really separate politics from the law. And so again, I would like for us to be in a system where we didn't have to think about the politics of whether or not we should actually hold a former president accountable for alleged crimes. I wish we lived in a world where, the law actually was applied equally and it did matter. But apparently it does not, at least not at this moment, because what we have are politicians saying we should worry about more about the politics than actually, preventing somebody, from getting away with trying to essentially overthrow the country to keep his own power. There's more. Okay, that was all the quotes, actually. But look, they use that, excuse, and then they also call it a witch hunt, say it's, again, it's all political, and say it will help Trump anyway, but will it? Well, let's look at the polls. According to a July 6th Politico Ipsos poll, half of Republican respondents said a conviction on the documents case or the Manhattan DA case had no impact on how they would view his campaign, while 41% of all respondents said that a conviction in either would make them less likely to support the former president. So I guess when it comes to Republicans, half of them said, we don't care if Donald Trump's a criminal. We'll still vote for him anyway. We don't care. Now, of course, if you're only relying on Republican voters to win an election, okay, sure, I guess that position would make sense. But once you get out of a Republican primary, you also have to, appeal to people in the general election. And that might be difficult if you're a convicted criminal. Look, there's nothing in the law that says that you can't run as a convicted criminal, as we're probably very likely to find out. But still, they're saying, we don't care about the law. We don't care about law and order. And that's unfortunately the truth of it. And they will spin it however they're going to spin it, that this is, fake charges, witch hunt, et cetera, et cetera. They seem to be finding a lot of witches. And again, by the way, that poll doesn't even cover, this new upcoming indictment with all the other stuff, the fake electors and the stuff that I had already mentioned. But again, it doesn't really matter because at this point, I don't really see anything that's going to change a lot of these Republicans' minds. Will they vote for Donald Trump if he's sitting in a prison cell? And I hate to say it, but yeah, they probably will. And they'll be proud of it. Yeesh. Okay. Moving on. Fox host Jesse Waters seems to be surprised that people are blaming the recent heat wave on climate change.
The left rushing to blame global warming for that dangerous heat wave gripping the nation and the world right now. But I think the heat's getting to their heads. Climate change obsessed liberals are actually acting crazier than usual, with eco-extremists in Germany literally gluing their hands to airport runways as a way to sound the alarm on how the planet's cooked.
Eco-extremists, folks. Eco-extremists. Wow. The left rushing to blame the global warming, for the heat waves. Heat's getting to their heads. Oh, yeah. No, it's actually literally what we're doing. Yes, we are blaming global warming for heat waves because that's exactly why it's happening. Yes, it's the reality. It's the reality. Okay. But look at the narrative, though. Climate-obsessed liberals, eco-extremists. These people they're so crazy. Actually knowing and understanding the science, or listening to the people who actually do. crazy. No, look, the scientific community is quite clear when it comes to climate change. Climate is changing rapidly due to human activity. The planet's warming. And that's causing not so good things to happen. Like, for example, heat waves that happen more often and are more intense when they happen. This is reality. And let me give you some stats here. Over the last decade, researchers analyzed over 100 heat waves around the world and concluded that climate change made almost all of them more likely or more severe. Now, there are a couple of studies in there that had inconclusive results, but the vast majority of them basically pointed out that, hey, climate change making heat waves more often and more intense. Oops. Now, one study found that the 2017 European heat wave, nicknamed Lucifer. Okay. Wow.
It's the devil, okay?
How does the devil, at least? That was made 4 times more likely because of climate change. Another found that an exceptionally warm summer in Texas in 2011 was made 10 times more likely thanks to climate change. In a few cases, researchers have also calculated that heat waves would have been virtually impossible without the 2 degrees Fahrenheit or 1.2 degrees Celsius. The planet has already warmed since pre-industrial times. So we wouldn't have had those heat waves without all that warming. Scientists also estimated that a heat wave in Siberia last year, which brought temperatures in the Arctic Circle to 100.4 degrees Fahrenheit, was made 600 times more likely due to the warming climate. No, just think about it this way, right? Siberia, not known for heat waves, 100.4 degrees in frickin' Siberia. Can you honestly look at that and think, liberals, climate change. Left eco-extremists talking about 100 degrees in Siberia again. That's normal. No, it's not normal. It's incredibly abnormal. Look, I'm not saying that there hasn't ever been bizarre weather events, that there hasn't ever been heat waves, droughts, hurricanes, etc. Of course, that is natural weather. It's natural weather patterns. But the thing is, It's that it's happening more often and they're more severe. The proof of climate change lies in the fact that these things are happening more often and are stronger, more severe than they were. Andrew Dessler, a professor at atmospheric sciences at Texas A&M University, said that, quote, now, if we have an extreme heat wave, the null hypothesis is climate change is making that worse. That is now the default assumption. It didn't used to be that way. Before, scientists were like, I don't know, we need more data. We need to look into this a little bit further to see whether or not climate change actually did make this, heat wave worse or more possible. Nowadays, the science is in. It's already settled. The data is here. And now the default hypothesis is, no, climate change definitely had an impact on this. In fact, Friederike Otto, a climate scientist and the associate director of the Environmental Change Institute at the University of Oxford, noted, every heat wave occurring today is made more likely and more intense by the human-induced climate change. Literally in our faces. By the way, getting back to Dessler here, he also said, quote, instead of having to prove that climate change did affect the heat wave, the burden of proof is now on any scientist to prove that global warming didn't play a role. So now the default position is, well, you got to prove that it didn't have an impact. There's not many people out there that can do that. Again, it's in front of our faces. That's the evidence. What are you going to believe? Your lying eyes or some millionaire on cable TV? I mean, I guess I know what the Fox News audience believes, but the vast majority of people, they can see what's going on. They can see climate change. They can see the effects of climate change that is happening with, again, more wildfires, stronger storms, more intense storms, sea level rise, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter what some people believe, okay? Oh, or what some people claim to believe. Because, again, I think that there's a lot of very wealthy people who actually do know the science, who believe the science, but don't care. These people are sociopathic that say, look, I know that what we're doing here, the pollution that the companies that I own or invest in, they're putting out, all of this pollution, all of this, carbon dioxide, which is, again, warming the planet and making places inhospitable, sometimes even unlivable for human beings, for human life. But I just don't care, because at the end of the day, I'm not going to be around forever. And I'm going to just amass as much wealth and political power as I can while I'm here. Sad day for you. I don't give a damn. But for those who actually do, buy into the climate denial, again, it doesn't matter what they believe, because climate change is here, it's happening, and it's just reality. Facts, at the end of the day, do not care about your feelings. Okay. Moving on. Let's go to polling. Huh. This is actually interesting, the polling on this. With many student borrowers not prepared to pay back predatory student loans in full after the Supreme Court struck down Biden's up to $20,000 in student debt relief, a poll that was taken shows that the people that are impacted by this know exactly who to blame, and it's not Democrats. In fact, the majority of respondents blamed the Supreme Court and Republicans for killing debt relief. This is according to a poll from Generation Lab. The survey released on Tuesday showed 47% college students and recent graduates across the country blamed the Supreme Court for unforgiven student loan debt, where Republicans come in second at 38%. Just 10% blamed the president, and only 4% blamed Democrats. Wow. Now, obviously, we've talked about this before. But the challengers in that case, the Republican states that led to the end of the president's plan, were, again, 6 Republican attorneys general. So, yes, it was Republicans. Yes, they brought it to the Supreme Court. Yes, the Supreme Court is deeply conservative. And yes, they voted to, again, strike down something that would help 40 million people. Now, there's more results here. The poll also found that about 77% of young people knew about the court's recent decision, while 23% did not. Mainly it's because they pay attention to news, social media, etc. 61% of those surveyed did not agree with the Supreme Court's ruling. 17% did. 21% were not sure if they agreed or disagreed with the court's decision. So now that debt relief, again, would have helped 40 million borrowers and cost about $400 billion. So number one, let me just note that I was wrong about this. I believe that students would actually blame Biden and the Democrats for not getting it done and would not turn out to vote in the next election. Because again, Biden ran on, oh, we're going to forgive some portion of student loan debt. This is a big thing. We're going to do this. And then it, when it didn't happen, I figured that there was going to be some sort of, student revolt. People were going to be very, very upset and go, can't believe Biden would do this to us. No, it turns out I was wrong. And I'm actually happy to be wrong. I underestimated students, and I'm glad that I underestimated them because, look, this is a massive defeat for 40 million people who are struggling with student loan debt right now. And that's a fact. Now, that said, politically, speaking about the entire politics of the thing, it's actually not as bad for Biden as I thought it would be. Now, that said, Democrats could do something to, stop the conservative Supreme Court, and they could do so by expanding the Supreme Court. But they're not going to do that. They're not entertaining the notion. Most establishment Democrats are not, at least. And that's pretty disastrous because that means that not just for the remainder of Biden's term, but for decades, for the next generation, nothing is going to happen. Again, all conservatives have to do is just to challenge it in the lower courts, bump it up to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, as they are activist judges, will just strike it down. It doesn't matter. They can do it on just false, false assertions, lies, if you will, and made up hypotheticals, just like they did, of course, with the recent decision that allowed for discrimination against LGBTQ folks. It was somebody who makes, websites, not even wedding websites, but theoretically she wanted to make a wedding website, but she didn't want to have to make them for gay couples, even though she's never made a wedding website ever and might still not even do so. Took it to the Supreme Court and won, allowing discrimination to now be legal in this country against LGBTQI plus folks. So that's what's going on here. Okay, that's what the Supreme Court's doing. In this case, for the student debt relief, you had these activist judges take Republican attorneys generals at face value and ignore the fact that their standing argument, i.e., having the standing to even bring this before a court, was a lie. Internal emails containing company calculations revealed that after debt cancellation is enacted, this was Missouri. This is one of the big plaintiffs in the case was Missouri's Mohila, which is their student debt servicing arm of the government, would actually not lose revenue. One internal company document called the Forgiveness Impact Summary outlined what would happen if the loan forgiveness plan were enacted. Figures from August of 2022 showed that if $20,000 of student loan debt for Pell Grant recipients and $10,000 for student loans for every other borrower were forgiven, Mohila would still earn over $96 million in revenue from servicing direct loans, compared with $88.9 million in revenue in 2022, a 9% increase. So, again, they were not impacted and therefore shouldn't even had any standing to sue And this case should not have been taken up by the Supreme Court. It should have been thrown out. But instead, the activist judges in the Supreme Court decided to ignore it and claim that, and use it to claim that the HEROES Act, which passed through Congress, it was an act of Congress, didn't allow the Secretary of Education to do loan forgiveness, which is preposterous because they're currently doing loan forgiveness. The department has been forgiving student loans left and right. Just recently, the administration forgave student loan debt for more than 800,000 borrowers. And this is just the latest one. But here's the thing. The right wing did not want this debt relief plan to go through because it would have been a political win for Biden. But instead of it being a win for him, since they denied him that win, they thought that it would be a big loss when it comes to people voting. Turns out, no, it might actually be a bigger loss for Republicans. It might actually galvanize student turnout. Again, I don't know how you could go against 40 million students and not come out a loser, but Republicans, well, they figured it out. Then again, they could never count in the student vote anyway. And so I think it's pretty clear that they didn't care. They just didn't care and tried to appeal to people who just didn't want debt relief to go through for anyone. That said, here's Chairwoman of the House Committee on Education and the Workforce, Virginia Fox, Republican. Quote, the Biden administration's blatantly political attempt to circumvent the Supreme Court is shameful. The Biden administration is trampling rule of law, hurting borrowers, and abusing taxpayers to chase headlines. This is what she said after the loan forgiveness for 800,000 borrowers. You're hurting borrowers by helping them. But somehow the Supreme Court denying loan forgiveness for 40 million people, is that helping? Is that what you consider to be helping borrowers? No. And I, by the way, I also love the Republican argument here that they've used against debt cancellation as, well, you're just promising free stuff for votes. Yes. That's kind of how you win elections, actually. You promise to make people's lives better. Canceling up to $20,000 of student loan debt for millions of borrowers would effectively make people's lives better. Help them be able to, finally pay off their loan, pay it off sooner, or completely get rid of it, allowing people to, actually do normal things like buy homes, cars, and, not be stuck servicing loans for the next 20 years, which, by the way, in a lot of cases are predatory loans and don't actually help the economy because it takes money out of, and by the way, this is different than stuff like credit cards, which again helps in consumer purchases, okay, or homes, which helps build wealth, sometimes eventually helping build generational wealth if the homes are passed down to your kids, families, whatever. All that stuff is good for the economy, but student loans, well, they're not good for the economy. It's just taking money out of people's pockets for an education that in a lot of cases are required, but still actually doesn't pay enough to justify the cost of getting said education. And I'm not just talking about like, gender studies, which, by the way, gender studies is based as fuck. So, I mean, a lot of the people that are complaining about gender studies should probably take gender studies. They would learn something. But even so, you have, people that are getting business degrees, people that are getting culinary degrees and end up working at McDonald's. I mean, they've got a culinary degree, they can work at a high-end restaurant, and some of these people end up working at McDonald's for minimum wage and yet having to spend so much money on those degrees. So that's predatory, and it's an absolute travesty. That's why loans need to be forgiven. And by the way, I think we should do further. Biden's policy, while I think it's fine, and I think we should definitely do it, I also don't think it's enough. I think it's nothing more than a Band-Aid, really, which wouldn't solve the real problem behind student loan debt. we need to eliminate tuition altogether from public universities, public colleges and universities, trade schools as well. Just get rid of the tuition. There was a time in this country's history where we actually had that. We do not anymore. And not only do we need to get rid of tuition to prevent people from getting this debt in the first place, but also to cancel all of the debt completely from public colleges and universities. Now, I'm not counting private schools because that's a different thing. Those are the correct policies, though. If you care about having an educated populace that will create new jobs and foster innovation, you'd be in favor of more education and making education accessible to everyone. And if you don't care about those things, well, then you're probably a Republican. Okay. And there you go. Learning's for woke losers. It's probably what half of my comments on my Facebook are probably. Oh well.
Pink-haired communist. Woke.
All right. Anyway, one last story here. Try to knock it out pretty quick, but it has to do with Supreme Court corruption because, of course. The scandal involving billionaire Harlan Crow showering Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas with gifts, very expensive gifts and trips, and then being involved in cases brought before the Supreme Court got a little bit worse, if you can believe it. Turns out Crow's gift giving also helped him score some pretty sweet tax breaks that he did not actually deserve. Because, of course, right? So now Crow has for years used his 162-foot yacht, the McKellar Rose, as sort of a charter business. So he claims in order to avoid paying taxes. In fact, ProPublica reported that decades ago, Crow and his family had formed a company, Rochelle Charter, Inc., in order to lease out their super yacht. Who did they lease it out to? Apparently no one. Data from between 2003 and 2015, the company reported actually losing money in 10 of the 13 years. Net losses reached nearly $8 million, with about half going to Harlan himself. Now, normally losses are bad, but when you're, a business, you can write those losses off on your taxes to avoid paying them. Yes, the yacht tax breaks, among other loopholes, actually enabled Crow to pay an average income tax rate of 15% during that time period. I am self-employed, technically. I'm an independent contractor, but I pay more of a percentage of my income in taxes than a billionaire. In fact, most middle-class Americans pay more in taxes as a percentage of their income than billionaires like Harlan Crow. And this is one of the reasons why. I'm not a billionaire. I'm not a millionaire. I'm not even a 100,000-aire. Okay? And yet, why am I paying more of my income to taxes than these people? Now, he did it while taking a Supreme Court justice out on lavish trips that I'm sure had absolutely no bearing to do on any of the cases that Thomas would rule on involving Crow's business dealings, right? Or anything Crow was involved in. Real estate industry, for example? No. Perish the thought. But here's the thing, it gets worse. These sorts of deductions can only be had by a purported business operator, as I mentioned. But was this a legitimate business? Was he actually chartering out this yacht? Turns out, nope. ProPublica spoke to about a dozen former crew members of the ship, and none of them said that they were aware of the super yacht ever being chartered. Cross-checking that with schedules for 3 different years, the boat seemingly was only ever used to cruise Crow's family, friends, and executives of his company around. So this was a personal yacht for pleasure cruise that was somehow considered tax-wise to be a business and therefore enabled Harlan Crow to get tax breaks on the losses from that so-called business. This is the corruption, everyone. This is corruption. And that's not all. As recently as 2019, an attorney representing the supposed yacht chartering company, Rochelle Charter, had filed an application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office. Why so late? Now, in order to do that, of course, you have to show that this yacht was actually used commercially. And they really couldn't do that. So in order to make their case to the Patent Office, Crow's attorney created a brochure. This brochure reads, "This magnificent yacht has cruised the oceans of the world with a graceful and gentle motion, only found on the most superior seagoing vessels." Pamphlet boasted of the boat's fine, sea kindly hull and mahogany paneled formal dining room that seats 16. That same brochure, though, said nothing about how you could actually charter this thing. Now, upon seeing that, the trademark office was initially skeptical. They're like, okay, this sounds nice, but this doesn't prove that it's a business. And then that's where the attorney went to Google and pulled up screenshots from websites like superyachts.com and liveyachting.com that showed links and references to yacht charter services offered in connection with applicant Michaela Rose Mark, according to the attorney. So, look, the Patent Office looked at that and they said, okay, whatever. Approved. That still doesn't mean it's a real business. Their proof, the websites, they just host profiles for hundreds of ships, regardless of whether or not they can be chartered. There's no actual real proof that this boat was ever chartered. Ever. That website would encourage users to contact a broker to find out if it could be chartered. But again, maybe it could be, but there's no evidence that it ever was. In fact, Senate Finance Committee Chair Ron Wyden, in the ProPublica piece, is quoted as saying, quote, "Based on what information is available, this is a look of a textbook billionaire tax scam." Yes. Yes, it does. He further said, these new details only raise more questions about Mr. Crow's tax practices, which could begin to explain why he's been stonewalling the Finance Committee's investigation for months. And so now, again, great example of this corruption, but also a good example of how billionaires spend their time. You see, instead of, running their businesses, because the CEOs seem to have a lot of time in their hands. I mean, the best example of that actually is to look at Elon Musk. Owns 3 companies, spends all of his time tweeting memes, proving that the cream does not rise to the top. Sometimes that cream is just shit. At least in the case of Elon Musk. The meritocracy doesn't exist. Not real. They just sit. A lot of these billionaires, they just sit and scheme about ways to pay less money in taxes and to avoid regulations, which is where the Supreme Court comes into play. You see, regulations can be challenged by corporations and taken to court. The Supreme Court, for example, Obama's Clean Power Plan, taken to the courts. So, some of them, of course, they got to work their ways to some of the lower courts, which is why the right wing during the Trump administration stacked a lot of the lower courts, but also stacked the Supreme Court, which eventually makes its way up there too. These same people wine and dine and give fancy trips to these Supreme Court justices that will see these justices decide whether or not they will save money. And this just adds to the already huge list of problems with Justice Thomas and other Supreme Court justices now, who's received secret and lavish gifts for decades, including luxurious island hopping excursions on these super yachts, tuition payments for his grandnephew's private schooling, and even a secret deal in which Crow bought Thomas' family property and proceeded to upgrade it while Thomas's mother lived in it. But I'm sure this has no effect at all whatsoever on any of the decisions that Thomas has made in regards to anything related to Harlan Crow's business. Right. They're just gifts to my great friend Thomas. My great friend Clarence. I love that guy. He's such a great guy. He just happens to help me in my business, voting in my favor pretty much every single time. Now they just have to go and buy the rest of the justices. Now, meanwhile, separately, Thomas's aide also collected Venmo payments, allegedly for a Christmas party hosted by the justice, from a string of high-rolling lawyers with cases before the Supreme Court. Yeah. Look, if you ask me, the highest court in this land is both corrupt and largely illegitimate and needs major, major ethics reforms before it could ever regain that legitimacy. Whether or not that will actually happen, at least in my lifetime, is an open question. But it does need to happen. Or again, it's going to continue to face even more questions about its legitimacy. And in a democracy, it's not a good thing. Not a good thing to have the population question the justice system. Okay. All right. There you go. That's the stories today. So let me read some super chats, member comments here before I head out for the day. Look at this. All right. So over on YouTube super chat, Gabby Mathis gifted 1 Waldorf Nation membership. Thank you for that. And said, people get real. Climate change is real. And I stand with the German young people who blew their hands worried about younger generations. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if anything, putting your body on the line for something you believe in, I mean, that's actually pretty brave, pretty ballsy. And you got to give them credit for that because it gets attention. Look, I know the big thing is like, oh, I can't believe you're blocking travel. You're blocking the runways, the planes. People got stuff to go. The thing about protests is that they're not supposed to be comfortable. They are supposed to interrupt things in order to gain attention. And while annoying, it's for a good cause. And that's kind of the whole point. The continuing existence of the human race on Earth, to be able to live in a place that has a functional food web, food system, agriculture, all that stuff, and places to live with temperatures that are livable. I mean, that's kind of a big, important thing, and maybe one of the most important things, because at the end of the day, money's not going to really matter if you have nothing to eat, if you can't grow food, if you can't go outside, without worrying about getting heat stroke just from stepping out into the sun. Things that are pretty important, basics for life. I mean, much more important than just amassing massive amounts of wealth. Protesters should avoid self-harm, says Darren S. I get that. Look, again, they are putting their bodies on the line, but it's not as if they're actually killing themselves. So let's be very clear about the distinction. Although gluing their hands to the runway, when you have, that just does make me worry about people's if they're burning their hands or not on that very, very hot tarmac. That worries me. Well, okay, but anyway. Thank you for going on the Nation with me today. Thank you for the super chats. Let's go over here to our Twitch community. God's favorite mathematician, thank you for subbing for a month at tier 1, 10 months. And Occam's Taser, thank you for gifting a tier 1 sub. Awesome. Thank you so much. Some of these protests show extreme courage. Yes, Extreme courage. Gotta love it. Awesome. All right, everybody. Thank you again for going around the nation with me today. Please like and share the stream if you haven't already. Check out our video clips, all that wonderful stuff. And with that, why don't we do a Twitch raid over? Let's do a Pac-Man raid. Pac-Man is the Pac-Man is online, so why don't we do that? Probably covering some Trump stuff. If you're interested in that. Everyone else, thank you all. Love you, and remember, change begins with you. Good night, nation. We'll see you all back here tomorrow.